And for our first story that we have right over here, I might as well go off and begin with the big one. Because this really is the story that just came out of left field and completely shook the entire animation community. Now, as you guys may know, recently we have been seeing what could be an absolute nightmare for people causing sexual harassment. Because ever since they discovered that Harvey Weinstein, who was once the most powerful man in Hollywood, has been using his power to sexually harass women, his life was pretty much entirely destroyed. Like, his position in Hollywood has been stripped away from him one by one. And pretty much everybody in the industry has been rejecting him since. And now there have been more and more people that have been discovered to actually be sexual predators in the entertainment industry. And this is coming from all different places. It's not just in movies, but also in television, like YouTube series as well. And sadly, there's also the animation industry. It is sad to report that not even in the animation world that they could avoid something that is seriously as criminal as sexual harassment and also having issues like major sexism. And apparently, this is one of them right here, and like I said before, it completely shocked people. Because Nickelodeon has actually fired the creator of The Loud House, Chris Savino, after numerous of sexual harassment claims. Now, this was immediately first reported on Cartoon Brew, where it actually stated right here, reading from my source, according to people within the studio, as many as a dozen women have come forward to accuse Savino of inappropriate behavior, ranging from unwanted sexual advances to threats of industry blacklisting after the end of a consensual relationship with co-workers. Now, at first, Viacom contacted Cartoon Brew, or a Nickelodeon spokesperson has mentioned Cartoon Brew, stating, putting up this statement, and there were plenty of other reporters, like from Variety, Deadline. They would all get that same message, saying that Viacom is committed to the safety and well-being of our employees and to fostering a workplace free from harassment. As a matter of policy, we do not comment on specific employee matters, but we take all allegations of this nature very seriously, investigate them thoroughly, and take any necessary actions as a result. Now, it only started out as this one Cartoon Brew article, and people had their suspicions. You know, they're not sure if this is actually true. But as time would pass, like the days after this report was actually released, there have been more and more women that actually came out and revealed that, yes, he is actually a sexual harasser. One of these is actually Ann Walker Farrell, who is a director at BoJack Horseman. Oh, well, like for BoJack Horseman, I mean. But she went onto Twitter and she revealed her story about how Chris Savino would be sexually harassing her. And then Cartoon Brew would later pick up another story from an anonymous artist who decided to share her story with her relationship with Chris Savino. And let me read that to you right over here. It actually stated, this took place about 4 years ago. Chris Savino was working with a development program at Nickelodeon. A woman close to me had had a project that was being developed under his supervision. He got her personal contact information under the guise of helping her develop the project off hours. He presented himself as a mentor. He then proceeded to send her unwanted text messages that were lewd and sexual in nature on more than one occasion. When she turned down his advances, her development project was let go. He is a classic case of a predatory male using his status of power over a female subordinate. As with most victims, she was worried of how speaking out against him would affect her career, and no action was ever taken. And there have been many more stories. In fact, it could be possible that more than a dozen women actually did come out and reveal their story about how Chris Savino would take advantage of them sexually. Now, I just want to mention right now, though, that this is actually not the first time, and it's highly doubtful if this will even be the last time that there is a major case of sexual harassment in the animation industry. The most recent example that I could think of was back a few years ago with the Cartoon Network series Clarence. You may recall the creator Skylar Page. He was a massive sexual predator, like really twisted in the head. Like, he is pretty much the kind of person that no woman should ever be allowed to be alone in the room with him, because bad things are gonna happen no matter what. Like, he is legit the kind of guy that's not allowed to be alone in a room with a woman. Which is pretty much also why Mike Pence kind of put that rule onto himself, just in case. Okay, but all political zingers aside, what ended up happening was that after one of the sexual harassments occurred with Skylar Page, he literally went completely insane to the point that he had to be hospitalized, and later it was revealed that he had severe bipolar disorder, which either way is not an excuse to treat women in that manner. So what ended up happening was that Cartoon Network would immediately fire Skylar Page, and the showrunner would then be replaced by Spencer Rothbell, I believe. And also, not only that, but Rothbell also replaced Page as the voice of Clarence. And interestingly enough, now that Chris Savino is officially fired from Nickelodeon, Nick actually got a little bit more revealing. Like, they actually stepped up a little bit more to reveal that, yes, it is Chris Savino that's been causing this problems. And they actually released a statement by saying that Chris Savino is no longer working with Nickelodeon. We take allegations of misconduct very seriously, and we are committed to fostering a safe and professional workplace environment that is free from harassment or other kinds of inappropriate conduct. The Loud House, which is currently in its second season, will continue to air on Nickelodeon and be in production. Season 3 is scheduled to premiere early in 2018. And by the way, this is a quote that I read on another source, this time being in Deadline. So that's pretty much the entire story, that Chris Savino has officially been revealed to be a massive sexual predator, and this has actually been going on for decades. This is not like Skylar Page, where you only had a few incidents happen on Cartoon Network. This has spanned throughout his entire career in animation, both on Cartoon Network and on Nickelodeon. So that's pretty much the whole big story, and as you could tell, there have been major consequences that have been taken. Now, I do want to say that at first, when I first saw this Cartoon Brew article discussing about Chris Savino causing sexual harassment numerous of times before, I felt a little bit of doubt because, like I said before, this was an article that just came right out of nowhere, and it was only Cartoon Brew reporting this, so of course there would be a lot of suspicions. Now, I wanted to check a little bit more info, and after I had a chat with a friend of mine named Ryan, he actually did reveal to me, and he was probably the first one to really convince me that, yes, he actually is a massive sexual predator. And I think before even Cartoon Brew picked up the different stories, like, he was the first one to actually tell me that this has been going on for decades throughout his career with numerous of women. And he actually then pointed out to me to a Twitter page from at Jeraspat. And let me tell you, Jeraspat right over here, he is one hell of a trooper. Like, he really is one heck of a Robert Mueller. In fact, he actually might have done a better job trying to go and cover some evidence to show that Chris Savino is actually a sexual predator, and has been saving a lot of different articles and social media pages all around social media, revealing all different stories from women in animation, truly revealing that, yes, he actually is a sexual predator, and this has been going on. And in fact, this has actually been revealed even before this news actually broke out, that women are trying to give out warning signs that Chris Savino is actually a terrible person. So after all that, I started to believe more and more that this is actually legitimate, and that Chris Savino actually is a terrible person that would be capable of doing that to women. And it's honestly really shocking, I gotta say. I mean, even though, yes, like at this point, after the numerous of stories that we've heard ever since Harvey Weinstein, like it's almost repeating itself, but the fact that this is also legitimately going on in the animation industry, where it's not just happening like one little instance like with Skylar Page, but it's been going on for a long time, and some people would end up getting away with it. It's honestly really shocking. So this really did convince me that, yes, Chris Savino would actually do this. But I will say, though, there is one thing that I am debating a little bit. Because if there could be one thing that is more crazy than this story right over here with Chris Savino, I think it's honestly the people's reaction to this story. That could debatably be even more insane than the story itself. So I decided I want to go and do my own research and dig a little deeper. So what I did is that I went onto social media and created a poll on Twitter, and pretty much go ahead and ask a straightforward question, saying, do you think the Loud House creator Chris Savino sexually harassed these women throughout his career in animation? And I only put up two options. It's either yes or it's either no. So I just put it up right over there, and honestly, the result that I've got, it is insane. It really is. Like, honestly, I wouldn't expect to be really, really close. Now, of course, I did receive a lot of people that would reply saying that they don't know. But those that did answer, man, we got some real interesting statistics. So, out of a total of almost 500 people who voted on my Twitter poll, which specifically is 478 people in a span of 24 hours, and by the way, I recently have done this, it is a total of 56 people that said yes. 56% of people said that they do believe that Chris Savino is a sexual harasser, while 44% said no. And like I said, I actually just recently created this poll. This is like a few days after the evidence are starting to come up. This is a few days after women are starting to speak up about their experience with Chris Savino. And that's what ended up happening. Like, for a while with this poll, it is insane how close it is that it would always be split down the middle, like almost 50-50. Sometimes it's a little bit yes, sometimes it's a little bit more no. But ultimately, I guess it's just there's a little bit more yes than there is no. Like, this is... wow, honestly... so basically, this is more of a 12% difference. Well, technically, like, technically you could say... is it, would it be... actually, no. This is, well, technically I say 12%, but... technically it would be 6% more on yes. But still, this is ridiculously close to 50-50. And that's why I say that it is pretty insane looking into people's reaction to this story, because even right now, even as you're listening to this, there are still a lot of people out there that would legitimately deny this story, that they would not believe that Chris Savino would actually do such a thing. And not only that, that they would even come to the defense of Chris Savino and try to help him by saying that this is all fake news, this is all a major conspiracy or whatever. Like, they would actually go and really get out of their way to go and defend Chris Savino and say that he is not a sexual harasser. Now, they would bring out so many different excuses in this case. They could say things like, well, Nickelodeon didn't necessarily confirm that he's a sexual harasser. There's not enough information, or there's not enough evidence that really did proving so. Or Cartoon Brew is not necessarily such a reliable source. They can have a pretty bad reputation. And they would go into all different sources, or they would even mention like they're not hearing Chris Savino's side of the story. And they would bring all that up. But honestly, listening to those excuses, like, there's a lot of holes in them. Like, I will admit that technically, yes, it is true that Cartoon Brew does have a pretty bad reputation, and that Ahmed is a really controversial figure in the animation industry, and yeah, more often than not, he could be a pretty crappy journalist. And even with this article right over here, it really does feel like Cartoon Brew just really jumped the gun, and it's almost like they made things worse than Nickelodeon than it should. Like, Nickelodeon could have, like, easily controlled this situation and handled it well, but Cartoon Brew just had to immediately respond quickly, all because they want to be the first to report it. Like, Ahmed has a little bit of that same mentality as those annoying YouTube commenters that when they would see a video immediately pop up, they would go straight down to the comments and go, "First! I'm first! I'm the first one to write a comment on this! I'm first! Give me a trophy!" You know, that kind of mentality. Like, you could tell that with Cartoon Brew, they just want to report it first because they want to have the credentials to say, oh, we're the first ones to do it. But here's the problem, though. As bad of a reputation as Cartoon Brew can have, there's never been a moment that they would report fake news. Like, I don't really recall a time that Cartoon Brew would completely invent a story. Like, they would just entirely make some stuff up. So, when you would see Cartoon Brew make a report that Nickelodeon would fire Chris Savino for sexual harassment allegations, then there must be some truth to it. But I know for a fact that no matter what excuse that those defenders would make, there is only one that I could think of onto what motivates them to go and defend it, to make them not believe that this story could be legitimate. And that is the fact that they are Loud House fans. They are incapable of separating the art from the artist. And they don't want to believe in the fact that the show that they love, the show that made them fall in love with Nickelodeon again, was actually done by a horrible human being who actually turns out to be a sexual predator. They don't want to believe that because their blind love for the Loud House is just way too strong. And I can guarantee you that through my experience, 99% of the time, people who would defend Chris Savino for his actions, it's mainly because they are huge Loud House fans. Like, you go on their social media and they would be talking about specific episodes, or on their profile picture, they would have a character from the Loud House. That's basically the big explanation to why they would want to defend it. And I know it's because of their Loud House love, mainly because if Chris Savino would be working on a show that people actually hate, something that the general public didn't necessarily enjoy as much as something like The Loud House. Like, if Chris Savino would be a worker on a show like Teen Titans Go, or the Powerpuff Girls remake, or the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatball series, or Big Mouth, then people would eat that story up, and they wouldn't need any more evidence to fully believe that Chris Savino would do such a thing. Like, they would immediately accept it. In fact, actually, I don't have to make any rhetorical examples, because there is actually a legitimate example that I could actually present to you. I have legitimately seen more people believing that one of the writers of the Powerpuff Girls remake is a pedophile just because there is one character that looks like him who has a crush on Blossom, more so than people believing that Chris Savino is a sexual predator, with actual evidence and testimonials from victims presented in front of them. It's honestly really insane. And there's no major science to it. It's because they love one show over another. When it's a show that they would perceive that it's bad, then they would assume the worst out of it, and all the people associated with that show is terrible. While if it's a good show, then they assume the best of it, and they would assume that everybody working on that show is actually good people. So that's the thing. In a way, yes, it's because of their bias towards the show that they would be willing to go and defend the creator of The Loud House. Now, I just want to say, though, if those people want to prove me wrong that this is not the case, that there is a little bit more to why they want to go and defend Chris Savino, then I actually have a little bit of a homework for you. Alright, so take the defenses that you have for Chris Savino, and I want you to go and use them to defend people like Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby. Because as far as I'm concerned with those three people, they're pretty much in the exact same position. They're all accused for the similar case, and on top of that, the same amount of evidence is pretty much being presented to point out that this is actually true. That way, you can actually go and prove to me that you are someone who believes in innocence until proven guilty, and that you're not just a hypocritical Loud House fanboy. Just do that, and maybe you could prove me wrong about you on why would you even be willing to defend someone who has been accused of sexual harassment. But I will say, though, that there could be one good thing that could actually come out of this entire controversy with Chris Savino and his sexual harassment over at Nickelodeon, and then him getting fired because of it. I could see that in the long run, it could actually be really beneficial that they could take this as a major lesson in order to make the animation industry a safer workplace for artists and animators. That they could be rest assured that there would be a lot less sexual harassment, that sexism would not be tolerated whatsoever, so that everyone can basically be treated equally and fully with respect. So that could be the best thing that could come out of this, is that they would take this as an entire lesson that sexual harassment, no matter what, should not be tolerated, and people with power should not take advantage of that, because that's basically the law of life. If you disrespect women, or if you disrespect other people with sexism or with sexual harassment, there will be consequences. Just like with what happened with Chris Savino. Now, there is also one big question that people do have with it right now, and this is a question especially asked by all the Loud House fans. They're wondering that now that they have kicked out Chris Savino, what's going to happen with the show? What's going to happen with the fate of its future, and what's going to be happening with the movie that's going to be coming out sometime in 2020. Well, honestly, for that, I feel like it shouldn't be that bad because, again, just take a look at Clarence, for example. After Skylar Page was fired, they didn't necessarily cancel Clarence immediately. They left the series to go on for a couple more seasons, and then that's it. And honestly, that's what I can imagine with what's going to be happening with the Loud House. It's going to highly depend on who's going to be the next showrunner, and if they can still keep that same enthusiasm as they did in the first 2 seasons, if they can continue that. What I can imagine what could most likely be the case is that Nickelodeon will let the Loud House run for 2 or 3 more seasons, have the show be on, have the movie be on as the grand finale, and then that's pretty much it. That's my prediction on what's going to happen with the Loud House, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see, and we'll have to see if the next person to replace Chris Savino can actually do a good job maintaining the success of the Loud House. For that, it's just something we'll have to see what will happen. But yeah, this is honestly one hell of a story right over here. And like I said before, I thought like there could be nothing that could really top the Rick and Morty Szechuan sauce controversy for a while. But then this came up and it really blew out of proportions. So yeah, honestly, for me right now, I honestly feel like there could be a chance that Chris Savino is innocent. But with all the evidence that we have seen and all the testimonials from the victims in the animation industry, I could be leaning towards yes. Chris Savino is a sexual predator, and justice has been served.